Father, I thank you for the opportunity to be back here at church tonight, Lord. I just thank you for everything that you're doing here at Southside right now, Lord. Thank you for the way that you're blessing us, Lord. And I just pray that we will not take that for granted, and that we will continue to seek after you in these times, Father. I thank you for being our loving Father, Lord, that through the work of Jesus Christ, that you have adopted us into your family as sons and daughters, Lord. And that's not something that most people understand or can fathom, Lord. And I just thank you for your love and all that means to us, Father. I just pray that as we continue on this study tonight, Lord, that your words will speak through, Lord, that it will not be my own. And I just pray that you'll give us the ears to hear what you have to say. I ask this all in the name of Jesus. Amen. Well, church, welcome back. It's good to be here with you all tonight. As we continue on with session 2 of Answering Islam. I know it's been a crazy week for me. Work's been super busy, and I'm just grateful to have the opportunity to be here again with you. So last week, we started our first session. Islam 101 is what I called it. So just a quick recap of some of the things that we covered there. We covered kind of the five main doctrines of Islam. The first one was God. So their belief in God is that there is only one, and his name is Allah. Allah is Arabic for the God. He is greater than everything. He is unknowable. He is impersonal. You cannot relate to him the way that Christianity, the way that we understand that we can relate to God. They believe in angels. Angels are somewhere between humanity and God. They are created spiritual beings. They can be good or bad. They have a hierarchy, so Gabriel or Jibril in Arabic is the top good angel. He is the archangel. And then Shaitan or Satan would be the top fallen angel. So they believe that we all have two angels, a good angel and a bad angel, and their jobs are to record our good and bad deeds. So they have the sacred scriptures that they follow. I say follow. They believe in the Torah, which would be the books of Moses. They believe in the Zabur, which would be the Psalms of David. They believe in the Injil, which would be the Gospels of Jesus. Now, I say they believe in them. They are affirmed in their holy book, the Quran, but they do not study them. They do not go to them for guidance. So the Quran, which means the recitation in Arabic, that is their holy book. It was given to them. It is the eternal word of Allah. We will spend more time on that book next week, but it supersedes all books that came before it. They believe in the prophets. They include lots of biblical figures that you would recognize, some of them in name only, but they include them in the Quran and in their belief system. There are some imams out there that I've heard recently. I don't know how far this teaching goes back, but they believe that the prophets were sinless. They teach that Jesus was sinless, but he is not God. That would be blasphemy. Muhammad, he is their last and greatest prophet, and his message applies to all people for all time. The last of the doctrines that we looked at last week was the future judgment. So those two angels come back into play. Your good and your bad deeds are weighed out on the scales of absolute justice by Allah. Only the good deeds that are compatible with the teachings of the Quran qualify. So chief among these good deeds, it's not good deeds as we think of, but it is following the teachings of the Quran, the teachings of Muhammad. So chief among these would be adherence to the 5 pillars of the faith, which we also looked at last week. So there is a loophole where you definitely get to go to heaven, and that is to die as a martyr in defense of Islam or in jihad. So the 5 pillars of the faith, those were those good works, those good acts of Islam. The first one is to recite the creed. So this is the shahada. So this means to bear witness. And what it is you stand before a Muslim, preferably an imam, and you say there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. and that's how you become a Muslim. So you pray the prayers 5 times a day. You face Mecca. These can be done anywhere except the Friday prayers are done in a group together in a mosque. You give the alms, or the zakat. This is 2.5% of your income, and it is given to the Muslim community, generally a mosque or a Muslim community center. You need to start the fast, Ramadan. So I messed up a little bit on this one last week. I said 12th month. On the paper, it says 9th month. The paper was correct. It was 9. I said 12 because I got ahead of myself, because the pilgrimage, which is number 5, the Hajj, is the 12th month. So the fast, Ramadan, this is the 9th month of the Muslim calendar. You're going to fast from the beginning of the day, from sun up till the sun goes down, and you're going to fast from food, drink, and pleasures. And then, like I mentioned, the Hajj, the pilgrimage. So you need to do this on the 12th month, at least once in your lifetime. So you travel to Mecca and you circle the Kaaba. This is called the Tawaf. And you will circle and you will pray and you will try and kiss the black stone that is on the corner of the Kaaba. And you need to do this once in your lifetime. So that was pretty much what we covered last week. That's a quick recap. So this week, we're going to look at the central figure of Islam, and that is the Prophet Muhammad. So I'm going to start by reading 1 John chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. So John writes here, he says, "Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus is not from God, this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard was coming and now is in the world already." I think it'll be clear here in a minute why I read that passage. Now, tonight, looking at Muhammad, I'm not trying to talk bad about him or disparage Muslims. I'm just telling you the facts, telling you the history. I'm going to say some things tonight that are vile and disgusting, but it's what happened. And I think it's important that we know and understand who this so-called prophet was. So just a little quick understanding of the belief about Muhammad. He is not divine. He is not deified in Islam. They do hold him in super high regard. He did not perform miracles. They do revere him to the point that if you criticize Muhammad, it is a sin on par with blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. So what we would see is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. To criticize Muhammad, what I'm going to be doing here tonight, is a sin on par with that. There are some countries that you would be killed for doing that. Muslims are not encouraged to study and research the origins of Islam. This could lead to doubt, or just an accusation of doubting even, and that is sometimes enough to get you killed. So there was I saw in an article about this, that there used to be a warning on the University of Southern California's website where the Hadith and some of these Islamic origin stories were, and there was a warning message there for Muslim students not to read it on their own, because we'll see. But Muslims claim that Muhammad is the best man who has ever lived. He is the example. He is what Muslims should strive to be. He is who they're trying to emulate. He is the true expression of Islam. Now, I mentioned Nabeel Qureshi last week. If some of you may be familiar with him, Nabeel Qureshi was he grew up Muslim. He was raised here a lot of his years in the Hampton Roads area. His father and mother were immigrants from Pakistan. His father was in the Navy, and he spent his high school years and his college years here in Hampton Roads. He went to ODU, and it was during his time at ODU that he became friends with a Christian named David Wood, and they had a lot of conversations. They were both very big into defending their faiths, And David invited Nabil to come to a Bible study one night and give him the opportunity to speak at the Bible study and to present why Muhammad is a prophet of God. So I want to read you what Nabil presented that night. So this is what he had been taught all through his childhood years. This is what he believed as somebody defending Islam about Muhammad. So Muhammad lived a very meek and humble childhood. His father died before he was born. His mother died shortly thereafter, and he lived most of his childhood as an orphan. He grew to become a trusted and respected young merchant, ultimately marrying a widow 15 years his elder instead of a youthful maiden. Muhammad was thus a very noble young man, uninterested in the worldly attractions, even before receiving his prophetic call. It was only with the reluctance that he accepted the mantle of prophethood. Within the pagan environment of Mecca, Muhammad boldly proclaimed monotheism with no concern for his personal well-being. Understanding the plight of widows, orphans, and the poor, he fought for their rights. Despite his peaceful message, the hatred of the Meccans against the message of monotheism led to persecutions. Although Muhammad was protected by his uncle, he faced ridicule and threats, even having camel entrails placed on him while he was prostrate in prayer. His followers, who had no protectors, fared worse, some even being martyred. The persecutions increased over the years, and the Meccans ultimately boycotted the Muslims, resulting in such harsh conditions that Muhammad's uncle and wife died. When a plot was underway to assassinate Muhammad, he fled to Medina, and it was there that he finally had enough support to defend the fledgling Muslim people. From that point on, Muhammad invited the tribes of Arabia to accept Islam, and many became allies of the Muslims on account of the beauty of the message. All the while, the Meccans kept coming to Medina to destroy the Muslims, but Allah miraculously defended them. After 10 years of having to fight such defensive wars, Muhammad made a treaty with the Meccans that allowed him to travel to Mecca and perform a pilgrimage to the sacred mosque, the Kaaba. Unfortunately, the Meccans broke their treaty, so Muhammad marched on Mecca with 10,000 followers. The Meccans could not withstand the might of the Muslim armies, so they surrendered. Although these were the very people who had persecuted and killed Muslims, the ones who caused the death of Muhammad's beloved uncle and first wife, the very ones who dragged the Muslims into war, and again at the cost of many lives, Muhammad granted them clemency by forgiving all of them. The fame of Muhammad's message spread throughout Arabia, and by the time Muhammad died 2 years later, the whole Arabian Peninsula had embraced Islam. Such was the character of Muhammad. In addition to being a champion for women and orphans, he was a resilient proclaimer of monotheism, a great leader, and a merciful conqueror. His life and character are proof that he is a prophet of God. So that is the presentation that Nabil Qureshi gave on who Muhammad was, on his character and his life, and that those were proof that he was a prophet of God, that he was merciful to his enemies, that he forsake worldly pleasures and desires to marry a widow and to care for a widow, that he understood the plights of women and orphans, and that he took care of them, and that he had beautiful teachings. But what does history say about Muhammad for real? Now, all of this information is from Muslim stories. It's from biographies about Muhammad. It's from the Hadith, which are the stories and traditions and teachings of Muhammad. That's where all this information is drawn from tonight. So, Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 CE. Now, Mecca at the time, it wasn't a thriving city or anything. It wasn't a trade hub. It was a tribal city. He was of the Quraysh tribe. They claimed to be descended from Ishmael. I think that came after the formation of Islam, when they tried to tie Abraham into there. But that's where he traced his lineage to, was to Ishmael. Now, Mecca, the city center, I had mentioned the Kaaba a couple times. So in the center, you had this building, this black cube. In the corner was a stone, probably either
piece of a meteor or some desert sand that had turned to black glass from an impact of a meteor, and they worshipped it as one of their gods. The chief god of the Kaaba was Hubal. Hubal was an idol that most likely was brought from Syria and was installed there. Some scholars now believe that Hubal was actually started as Baal in Syria, and then when it made it there, they gave him the name of Hubal. He was the moon god. So on top of the Kaaba was a crescent moon. And if you look at the Great Mosque today, you're still going to see the crescent moon symbol there. There were also like 300 plus other deities, idols that they worshipped there. So it was a pagan town, and the tribal people would go there and they would do this pagan ritual where they would circle the Kaaba, they would kiss the rock, and they would pray to it and ask it to help them. Islam still does that. So Muhammad's father, Abd Allah, he died about 6 months before Muhammad was born. Now, there's a story that comes from the first biography written about Muhammad. And in this story, his mother, since she was raising him alone, she would, as women did at the time, sometimes they had a woman in the tribe who would nurse and care for a lot of the children. So Muhammad was being raised by this other family that was raising other children as well. And in this biography, they tell the story that one of his brothers that was part of this family, it wasn't Muhammad's biological brother, but was part of this family, runs up to his parents and is panicking. And his parents are like, "Where's your brother?" And he's like, "Two men in white threw him on the ground and tried to rip his stomach open. And he was screaming, and I ran here to get you." So they go to try and find Muhammad, and they find him standing there alone, just not sure what's going on. And so they ask him what happened, and he tells the same story. And so the parents are freaked out, and they're like, "This kid is possessed by Satan. We're going to take him back to his mom." So they do. They take him back to his mom. They don't want to tell her what happened. And finally, she tells them, "Tell me what happened." So they tell her, and she's like, "You believe he's possessed by Satan, don't you?" And so they're like, "Yeah, you're taking him back." So I thought that was very interesting that from his childhood is this story of believing that Satan is tormenting him. His mother died when he was 6 years old. So he goes to live with his grandfather. His grandfather dies 2 years later. So at this point, he goes on to live with his uncle, Abu Talib. Abu Talib is a merchant. He travels in camel caravans and trades all over the Arabian Peninsula, up into Persia, into Syria, through kind of the Palestinian region, and back into Saudi Arabia, or Arabia. So Muhammad starts to travel with him. Muhammad has no formal schooling. It's widely believed that he was illiterate. As he traveled with his uncle on the trade caravans, he's exposed to a lot of different belief systems throughout the region: the Arab paganism, Manichaeism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, and heretical forms of Christianity. At the age of 22, he goes to work for a wealthy widow named Khadijah. They get married 3 years later. If we fast forward about 15 years, Muhammad is now 40 years old. He's been working for his wife. Him and his wife run the trading company. And so now we're in the year 610. And Muhammad, he likes to go out into the desert and go into caves to have these spiritual experiences. And so he goes out to a cave near Mecca to fast and pray, and he encounters an angel. Now, this comes from the Hadith and the biographies. It says the angel presses him into the ground, telling him to read, and he says that I cannot read, and it does it 3 different times, and it's like smashing him into the ground. It's compressing him. He thinks he's going to die, and finally it says to recite. And so now the angel is going to give him the words of Allah to recite. So he returns home to his wife. He's distraught. He's believing that he has been oppressed by a jinn. Now, if you remember last week, a jinn would be a demon. So he believes he's been possessed by a demon. He believes this is Satan. And his wife and her cousin convince him that it's not a jinn, but it's the same angel that spoke to Moses. So Muhammad becomes suicidal at this point because he's had these weird visions, these encounters. He doesn't know what to do with it. So he goes up onto the mountain several different times, intending to jump to his death. But each time, the angel appears to him and claims to be Jibril or Gabriel. This spirit would be with Muhammad for the next 23 years, giving him revelations of the Quran, claiming to be speaking to him directly the words of Allah. Now, when Muhammad would have these revelations, it was recorded that he would hear the ringing of bells or the buzzing of bees, that he would sweat profusely, that his face would appear angry, that he would shiver, that he would foam at the mouth, and that he would have tremendous headaches. So now Muhammad, he's receiving these visions, he's receiving these teachings, so he starts to teach in Mecca, in his hometown where his tribe is. His first converts were his wife, his adopted son Zayed, his daughter Fatima, his cousin, who later becomes his son-in-law, and his future father-in-law, Abu Bakr. So in his 12 years preaching in Mecca, he only had about 70 to 150 followers. Now, Muhammad felt that his teachings were going to appeal to the Meccans because he was including parts of all their different belief systems for the people there, and so he felt that that would appeal to them. So, for instance, he has a teaching that he receives, and he goes and he tells them there was these 3 pagan goddesses that were part of the group that was worshipped there. They were called Alat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. And these 3 goddesses were known as the daughters of Allah. So they were daughters of God. And so Muhammad taught that you could pray to these goddesses and that they would carry your prayers to Allah. So he's trying to incorporate some of their paganism into some of his monotheism. He claims he received this teaching from the angel, and then later, Jibril informs Muhammad that these were a deception of Satan. And these become known as the satanic verses, that he was influenced by Satan to teach these. And so he flips again and starts teaching hardcore monotheism to the Meccans. So these early Quranic verses that we would know as the Meccan verses, they were relatively peaceful. It talks about there's no compulsion in religion, that we're going to be very respectful of the Jews and the Christians. But when the people of Mecca don't embrace him, they don't convert to Islam, he starts becoming more rigid and more confrontational. So after the death of his uncle and his first wife, the Meccans run Muhammad out of town. They tell him to leave. So he settles in another town called Taif, but that doesn't go well either, and he's rejected there, and he's run out of town. So now it's the year 622. Muhammad is a refugee. He has this victimhood mentality that is, his tribe has rejected him, his people have rejected him, and there is a resentment towards those people. So he flees north to a majority Jewish city called Medina. So in the Islamic tradition, this is known as the flight or the Hijra, and this is the start of the Islamic calendar. So he arrives in Medina. He is a Muslim refugee. And Medina has 3 large Jewish tribes. So they let him in as an immigrant. He settles into the minority neighborhoods. He tries to convert the Jews there. He even tries to kind of appeal to them by changing the direction of prayer towards Jerusalem. The Jews there are kind of basically like, hey, we got our own thing. We don't need yours. And they reject him. So he changes the direction of prayer back to Mecca. Now, as he is in these minority communities, he eventually gains enough political power that the Jews make a treaty with him. So he gains some followers there in the community. They decide they're all going to work together, and they're going to be nice to each other, and they're all going to get along. So now Muhammad's followers, his small group of followers back in Mecca, are still getting persecuted. They're still not welcome there. So they come to Medina, and they are welcomed in as Muslim refugees and Muslim immigrants. So this is where the big change happens for Muhammad. Because Muhammad has all his followers there. They've just come into town. There's not any work for them. They don't have jobs. They don't have any way of sustaining themselves. And they're also very angry at the Meccans for rejecting them. So now Muhammad gives permission to his followers to attack and rob Meccan caravans as they're traveling through. Surah 22:39 in the Quran says, "Permission is given to those who fight because they have been wronged." So the Muslims start to raid the Meccan caravans. Muhammad says he gets a fifth of the goods from the raids. So now Muhammad has gone from a religious leader to a politician and now to a military leader. While he's in this phase, he fights in 66 battles. Muhammad finds an excuse to claim victimhood over the smallest Jewish tribe in Medina, and he voids the treaty that he's made with them, and he drives them out of the city, and he takes all their property. So the second Jewish tribe is like, if he did it to them, we're next. So they send one of their leaders to Mecca to plead for help because they know, hey, the Meccans don't like him. Maybe they'll help us. Muhammad hears about this, and he has him assassinated. So he then confiscates all their property and expels them from Mecca. So we've gone from a majority Jewish city, to now there's only one Jewish tribe left in Medina. So this whole notion of while I'm weak, I will make a treaty with you. Once I'm strong, I will drive you out. I will subjugate you. This is the basis for the Islamic concept of taqiyya. So it means you can lie, you can deceive when you feel like you're in a weak position, when you feel like you're in danger. You can lie and make treaties. And then once you are strong, you can ignore those and you can break them. So in the year 627, we're just 5 years after Muhammad has entered Medina as a refugee. The Meccans send 10,000 men to stop Muhammad and the Muslims. The Muslims win the battle. They built in a bunch of defenses. It rendered the Meccan cavalry obsolete, and they had to fight hand to hand. And the Medinan archers, the Muslim archers, overwhelmed them. So the Muslims win the battle. The Meccans withdraw. They retreat back home. So now Muhammad turns his attention to the last remaining Jewish tribe. He encircles them, surrounds them. They last 25 days, and they surrender. The men are brought out into the streets and beheaded. They're digging trenches in the marketplace to do all these executions. The women and the children are divided up as slaves. Muhammad reserves a fifth of them for himself. Many of the Jews that fled Medina, they settled in a village to the north. Muhammad conquers them a year later in 628. He beheads the Jewish chief, and he takes his wife as his own. So during this time in Medina, Muhammad allows his followers to have up to 4 wives. He himself had at least 9. Some numbers have him up to at least 15. Now, this doesn't include the concubines and the slaves that he kept as well, because they were allowed to do that as well. So he had revelations that allowed the men to take the wives of the men that they defeated in battle. Muhammad marries one of his cousins. His adopted son, Zayed, that I mentioned earlier, he sees Zayed's wife, and he decides that he wants to marry her. So he pressures Zayed into divorcing his wife so that Muhammad can marry her. So Muhammad takes her as a wife. The people begin to question this, and are like, this is wrong. And so he has a revelation where he allows this. This is in Surah 33 of the Quran. In that same surah, so he's taken his adopted son, had him divorce his wife so he can marry her. And then in the same surah where he allows that practice, he also abolishes legal adoption. So now his son is no longer his son. So that really hit me when I was studying this, because I think one of the most powerful pictures that we see in the Bible is God adopting us into his family. And now Islam removes any basis of that in their belief system. They have no idea how to understand that because they don't allow it. So one of Muhammad's first converts, Abu Bakr, gives his 6-year-old daughter Aisha to Muhammad to be one of his wives. Now remember, Muslims today cannot condemn these practices because Muhammad is the best man that has ever lived, and he is the example of what true Islam is. I saw 2 different news articles this week. One of them they were both from English sources. One of them was the BBC, the other one, it was a couple different news channels in England. But one of them was about the epidemic that they're having in the Pakistani immigrant communities where people are having children with all these genetic defects because they're marrying family members. And so the children are being born, they can't hear, they can't see, they need full-time care, and it's a huge burden on their government healthcare system. The other story was an Afghani man who sold his 2 twin daughters to 2 men, and he sold them so that they could marry them. And when I say daughters, like 5 years old. And he was being painted as the victim in this because he felt like he had to sell his children to survive because he was so poor. And everybody was ripping the BBC for this article, like, how are you making this man out to be the victim? But again, they have no ground to condemn this because their prophet, their example, did this. In the year 630, Muhammad conquers Mecca. Now, he shows mercy to the Meccans, allowing them to convert to Islam. The Christians that reject converting to Islam, they're subjugated, and they must pay the jizya, or the tax, the tribute. So Surah 9:29 of the Quran says, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah and the last day, nor comply with what Allah and His Messenger have forbidden, nor embrace the religion of truth from among those who were given the scripture, until they pay the tax, willingly submitting, fully humbled." In other words, the Christians, fight them until you put them under your submission, until they give up and they pay the tax and are humbled and humiliated under your control. So he destroys the idols at the Kaaba. He declares it the house of Allah, but he keeps the pagan practice of the tawaf, where they circle and they pray, and Muslims still do this every year during the Hajj. So Muhammad continues to conquer the Arabian Peninsula up to the boundary of the Byzantine Empire. He dies just 2 years later in the year 632, and this is most likely the result of a poisoning by one of his wives. He believed that a wife of a Jewish leader that he executed, and then he took her to be his wife, had been poisoning him, and so that's how he died. So does Muhammad's life and character show that he is a prophet of God? Remember that Muhammad is the true expression of Islam, and Muslims should strive to emulate and live like him. So now you can understand why what the moderate Muslims teach and understand is a much softened version of who Muhammad really was. All right, so that brings us to the end of our time tonight. Sorry it wasn't a happy, cheerful message. Next week, we're going to continue on by looking at their holy book, the Quran, all these revelations that Muhammad got, and we will continue on there. I'll close us in prayer. Father, I thank you again for the chance to be here tonight, Lord, and to speak. I just pray that as we study this heavy subject, Lord, that it just drives us closer to you, Father, that we take comfort in your truth and your love, Lord, and that we embrace it and we learn and we study and we are able to share it with others, Father. The hope that we